The quiet murmur of our own thoughts is perhaps the most constant companion we know. From the subtle internal monologue that guides our daily tasks to the overt, sometimes embarrassing utterances we make when alone, talking to ourselves is a universal human phenomenon. It is a behaviour often dismissed as eccentric, a sign of loneliness, or even a precursor to mental instability. Yet, beneath these surface judgments lies a rich tapestry of psychological function and profound spiritual significance. What if these private conversations are not merely quirks of the mind, but essential tools for cognitive processing, emotional regulation, and even pathways to deeper self-understanding and spiritual awakening? This essay embarks on an integrated exploration of self-talk, examining it through the rigorous lens of psychological research and the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions. We will delve into how modern neuroscience and cognitive psychology illuminate the mechanisms and functions of our inner dialogue, revealing its critical role in learning, problem-solving, and emotional resilience. Simultaneously, we will turn to the contemplative insights of Buddhism, Christian mysticism, Sufi wisdom, Hindu philosophy, and existential thought to understand the spiritual dimensions of these internal voices. These traditions offer frameworks for not just observing, but transforming our relationship with the incessant chatter of the mind, pointing towards a profound silence that lies beyond words. By weaving together these disparate yet complementary perspectives, we aim to uncover a holistic understanding of why we talk to ourselves, what these conversations reveal about our inner world, and how we can consciously engage with them to foster both psychological well-being and spiritual growth. We will first establish a comprehensive psychological and spiritual framework, then explore modern manifestations of self-talk, illustrate these concepts with brief examples, and finally, present practical integration techniques from both therapeutic and contemplative domains. This journey invites us to reconsider the seemingly mundane act of talking to ourselves as a key to unlocking deeper aspects of the human experience, a bridge between the conscious mind and the boundless spirit. The act of talking to oneself, whether silently or aloud, is far from a mere oddity. It is a fundamental aspect of human cognition and development. Psychologists have long recognized inner speech, or verbal thought, as a critical mechanism that underpins a wide array of mental processes, from planning and problem-solving to emotional regulation and self-awareness. At its core, self-talk refers to any instance where an individual verbally communicates with themselves. This can manifest in two primary forms. 1. Inner speech, covert self-talk. This is the silent, private conversation we have within our minds, often experienced as an internal monologue. It lacks overt articulation and is highly abbreviated, often consisting of fragmented words, phrases, or even just concepts. It is estimated that most adults experience inner speech for a significant portion of their waking hours, guiding their actions and reflections. 2. Overt self-talk. This involves audible speech directed at oneself, ranging from whispers to full-volume utterances. While less common in public settings for adults, it is a normal and frequent occurrence when individuals are alone, under stress, or engaged in complex tasks. Children, in particular, exhibit overt self-talk, often termed private speech, as a natural part of their cognitive development. The prevalence of both forms highlights their normalcy. Far from being a sign of mental disturbance, Contemporary research suggests that healthy individuals engage in self-talk regularly, leveraging it for various adaptive purposes. The distinction often lies in the context and content, with overt self-talk frequently serving as an externalization of inner speech when a task demands more focused attention or when emotional intensity is high. The foundational understanding of how self-talk develops largely stems from the work of two pioneering developmental psychologists, Lev Vygotsky and Jean Piaget. While their theories offered contrasting perspectives, both underscored the critical role of self-directed speech in cognitive maturation. Lev Vygotsky, a Soviet psychologist, proposed that inner speech is an internalization of social speech. According to his sociocultural theory, 1934/1987, children first engage in social dialogue with caregivers. As they grow, this external speech becomes increasingly private, transitioning through a stage of private speech, audible self-talk, where children overtly verbalize their thoughts to guide their actions. Eventually, this private speech is internalized, becoming silent inner speech. For Vygotsky, inner speech is not merely thought expressed in words, but a distinct form of verbal thought that allows for complex cognitive operations, problem-solving, and self-regulation. It is a tool for thinking, born from social interaction and then repurposed for individual mental work. This perspective emphasizes the constructive and adaptive nature of self-talk, viewing it as a sophisticated cognitive skill. In contrast, Jean Piaget, 1923/1926, initially viewed children's self-directed speech as, quote, arguing that it reflected a child's inability to take the perspective of others. For Piaget, this speech was largely non-social, serving little communicative function and diminishing as children developed more socialized thought. While later research has largely favored Vygotsky's more functional view, Piaget's work did highlight the self-referential nature of early self-talk, providing a counterpoint that spurred further investigation into its purpose. Modern cognitive science largely synthesizes these views, acknowledging that while social interaction is crucial for the development of language and thought, Vygotsky, the initial stages may indeed reflect a more self-centered focus, Piaget, before fully integrating into sophisticated inner speech. Functional MRI studies, for instance, show activation in language-related brain areas, such as Broca's and Wernicke's areas, during inner speech tasks, supporting its linguistic nature and its role in cognitive processing. Alderson, Day and Ferniher, 2015. This neuroscientific evidence further solidifies the understanding of self-talk as a deeply embedded and functional aspect of the human brain. While psychology dissects the mechanisms of inner speech, spiritual traditions across millennia have engaged with the internal dialogue from a different vantage point, as a manifestation of the self or ego, a source of both distraction and potential insight, and a barrier to, or sometimes a pathway towards, deeper spiritual truth. These traditions don't just observe the phenomenon, they offer practices to transform our relationship with it. In Buddhist philosophy, the continuous stream of inner dialogue is central to understanding the nature of suffering, dukkha, and the illusion of a permanent separate self, anatta. The mind, often likened to a restless monkey or a wild horse, incessantly generates thoughts, narratives and judgments, much of which constitutes self-talk. The Buddha's teachings emphasize that these thoughts, including our inner monologue, are impermanent, anicca, and not ultimately ours in the sense of belonging to an unchanging self. The concept of anatta, no self, directly challenges the notion that there is a fixed I or me behind the constant chatter. Instead, the inner voice is seen as a conditioned phenomenon, arising from past experiences, cravings, tanha, and attachments. When we identify with this inner voice, believing I am my thoughts, we create and perpetuate suffering. This identification leads to clinging, aversion, and delusion, trapping us in a cycle of mental unrest. Practices like vipassana, insight meditation, involve observing this stream of thought without judgment or attachment. Meditators are encouraged to simply notice the thoughts as they arise and pass, recognizing their transient nature. The goal is not to stop thinking, which is often impossible, but to cease identifying with the thoughts and the thinker. By cultivating this non-identification, the meditator begins to see that the inner voice is merely a series of mental events, not the essence of who they are. This detachment from the inner monologue is a crucial step towards liberation from suffering and realizing the boundless, empty nature of consciousness itself. The silence sought in Buddhist practice is not an absence of sound, but an absence of clinging to the inner narrative, revealing a spacious awareness that transcends the ego's voice. As we observed in the previous chapter, Buddhist philosophy offers a profound framework for understanding the inner monologue, positing that identifying with the incessant stream of thoughts perpetuates dukkha, or suffering. The path to liberation, in this view, lies in cultivating a spacious awareness that transcends the ego's voice, achieved through non-identification with thought itself. This notion of moving beyond the self-generated narrative to access a deeper reality is not unique to Buddhism. Rather, it resonates across a multitude of spiritual traditions, each offering distinct yet convergent perspectives on the nature and purpose of our internal dialogue. We now turn our attention to these diverse wells of timeless wisdom, exploring how other spiritual paths perceive the inner voice and guide adherents toward its conscious transformation. In the rich tapestry of Christian mysticism, the inner voice is often viewed through the lens of a spiritual journey, a dialogue between the soul and the divine. Here, the self and its continuous stream of thoughts can be both a medium for prayer and contemplation and a significant barrier to experiencing God's presence. Mystics like St. John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila speak of a period of spiritual desolation where the usual comforts and clarity of prayer dissolve, and the mind's incessant chatter seems to intensify, obscuring the divine. This experience is not merely psychological distress, but a profound purification, a stripping away of the ego's attachments and self-generated narratives that prevent true communion. The goal is to move beyond discursive thought, beyond the quote 13 of the mind, to a state of silent receptive contemplation, where one might hear the quote 14 of God, rather than the clamour of one's own desires and fears. The inner monologue, in this context, must be disciplined and ultimately quieted, not through suppression, but through a surrender of the ego to a higher will, allowing for an infusion of divine grace and direct spiritual experience that transcends words. This journey requires a profound discernment, learning to distinguish between the ego's projections, the temptations of the adversary, and the authentic promptings of the Holy Spirit, which often manifest not as booming pronouncements, but as subtle intuitions and a deep sense of peace. Sufi wisdom. The mystical dimension of Islam similarly emphasizes the transformation of the inner self, referred to as the nafs. The nafs embodies the ego self with its inherent desires, attachments, and self-serving inclinations. It is the source of much of our internal dialogue, the constant planning, judging, desiring, and fearing that occupies the mind. Sufi teachings posit that the nafs operates on different levels, from the commanding nafs prone to evil to the tranquil nafs at peace with God. The spiritual path, or tariqah, is a journey of purifying and refining the nafs, leading it from its lower, ego-driven states to higher, more enlightened conditions. This purification involves practices such as dhikr, remembrance of God, which includes rhythmic recitation of divine names or phrases. Dhikr serves as a powerful antidote to the incessant chatter of the nafs, redirecting the mind's focus from worldly concerns and egoic narratives towards the divine. Through sustained dhikr, the mind becomes quieted, the grip of the ego loosens, and the individual begins to experience a deeper connection to the beloved, fostering a state of inner peace and eventually fana, or annihilation of the ego self in the divine presence. The inner monologue, therefore, is not merely a cognitive process, but a battleground for the soul, where the whispers of the nafs must be transformed into echoes of divine remembrance, allowing the true self to emerge from behind the veil of ego. Moving further east, Hindu philosophy, particularly the schools of Vedanta and yoga, offers a comprehensive understanding of the mind's inner workings. Central to these traditions is the concept of Atman, the true eternal self that is identical with Brahman, the ultimate reality. However, this Atman is often obscured by Maya, the illusion of the material world and the incessant fluctuations of the mind, known as chitta vritti. The inner monologue in this context is largely a manifestation of these chitta vritti, the thoughts, emotions, memories, and desires that constantly agitate the mental landscape. The Bhagavad Gita famously describes the mind as, quote, 15, the goal of yoga, as articulated in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, is chitta vritti nirodha, the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind. This does not imply an empty or inactive mind, but rather a mind that is no longer enslaved by its own habitual patterns of thought and identification. Through practices such as asana, postures, pranayama, breath control, and especially dhyana, meditation, practitioners systematically work to quiet the mental chatter. By observing thoughts without judgment and detaching from their content, one gradually diminishes their power. The inner monologue, once a source of distraction and identification with the impermanent ego, becomes a tool to be transcended, allowing for the realization of the Atman, a state of pure consciousness, bliss, and unity that lies beyond the confines of individual thought and speech. The various gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, also play a role, influencing the quality and nature of our thoughts, with the aim being to move towards a state of sattva, clarity and purity, which facilitates the quieting of the mind. While distinct from traditional spiritual traditions, existential thought in Western philosophy offers a compelling perspective on the internal dialogue, particularly concerning the individual's grappling with meaning, freedom, and the burden of self-creation. Philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus, though not prescribing spiritual practices in the conventional sense, delve deeply into the internal experience of anxiety, dread, and the profound responsibility that comes with our inherent freedom. The inner monologue for the existentialist is often a site of intense self-interrogation, a constant conversation with oneself about choices, values, and the very nature of existence. It is through this internal dialogue that we construct our identity, confront our mortality, and experience the anguish of being condemned to be free. There is no preordained meaning. Instead, we are perpetually engaged in creating it through our actions and our internal narratives. This perspective, while not seeking to transcend the inner voice in a mystical sense, underscores its fundamental role in shaping our experience of self and world, highlighting the individual's profound responsibility for the content and direction of their internal narrative. The silence, for some existentialists, is not a space of divine communion, but a terrifying void, the ultimate confrontation with nothingness, making the internal monologue an indispensable, albeit sometimes burdensome, companion in the human journey. In synthesizing these diverse spiritual and philosophical perspectives, we discern a powerful convergence. The inner monologue, while a fundamental aspect of human cognition and a tool for navigating the world, is also consistently identified as a primary site of egoic activity, a source of potential suffering, or a barrier to deeper truth. Whether framed as the nafs, chitta-vritti, the ego's clamour, or the anxious self-interrogation of existence, the unexamined or uncontrolled internal narrative is seen as obscuring a more profound reality, be it the divine, the true self, or an authentic, liberated state of being. Common threads weave through these traditions: the necessity of discernment, to distinguish between the superficial and the profound, the practice of mindfulness or contemplation, to observe the inner voice without immediate identification, and the ultimate goal of transcendence or transformation, moving beyond the ego's incessant commentary to access states of peace, clarity, wisdom, or union. The methods vary, from Vipassana meditation to Christian contemplative prayer, from Sufi dhikr to yogic dhyana, but the underlying intention is remarkably consistent: to consciously engage with and ultimately master the inner dialogue, not to silence it completely in a rigid sense, but to transform our relationship with it, allowing it to become a servant rather than a master, a pathway rather than a prison. Having explored the foundational psychological understandings of inner speech and the rich spiritual insights into the inner monologue as a potential veil or pathway, we are now prepared to bridge these timeless wisdoms with the contemporary human experience. We will next delve into the modern manifestations of self-talk, illustrating these concepts with examples from everyday life, and begin to explore practical integration techniques drawn from both therapeutic and contemplative domains. Our aim is to illuminate how these ancient principles can be consciously applied to foster psychological well-being and facilitate genuine spiritual growth in our present-day lives, moving beyond mere intellectual understanding to embodied transformation. Having journeyed through the profound insights of ancient wisdom traditions and foundational psychological theories, we now turn our focus to the contemporary understanding of the inner monologue, examining its intricate architecture and myriad functions within the modern human psyche. While spiritual paths often emphasize the transcendence of egoic chatter and the pursuit of inner silence, and early psychology illuminated its developmental origins, modern cognitive science and neuroscience delve into the sophisticated utility of self-talk as an indispensable tool for daily functioning, emotional regulation, and the very construction of self. We aim to bridge these perspectives, recognizing the inner voice not merely as a barrier to enlightenment or a developmental stage, but as a dynamic, multifaceted system integral to our cognitive and emotional landscapes. The pervasive nature of inner speech underscores its fundamental role in human cognition. Far from being a mere epiphenomenon, our internal dialogue serves as a constant companion, an internalized mechanism for processing information, planning actions, and navigating the complexities of our internal and external worlds. We engage in this silent discourse for a plethora of reasons, often unconsciously, utilizing it as a foundational scaffold for higher-order thinking. One of the most salient functions of the inner monologue lies in its cognitive utility, particularly in the realms of problem-solving and planning. When confronted with a complex task or a difficult decision, we instinctively retreat into internal deliberation. This involves an active verbal rehearsal of options, a systematic weighing of pros and cons, and an imaginative simulation of potential outcomes. We might internally pose questions, challenge our own assumptions, or even argue with ourselves, employing a form of internal dialectic to arrive at a resolution. This silent rehearsal allows for mental manipulation of information, facilitating strategic thinking and foresight without the immediate pressure of external action. From solving a mathematical problem to strategizing a career move, the inner monologue acts as our private mental workshop, enabling the construction and deconstruction of ideas with unparalleled flexibility. Beyond problem solving, self-talk is crucial for self-regulation and goal pursuit. It is the internal coach that prompts us to stay on task, the internal supervisor that monitors our progress, and the internal motivator that urges us onward despite obstacles. This regulatory function is deeply rooted in Vygotsky's concept of private speech, which, once internalized, continues to guide our behavior, maintain focus, and inhibit impulsive actions. We tell ourselves to quote 16, quote 17, or quote 18, quote. This internal instruction manual is vital for executive functions, enabling us to sustain attention, manage distractions, and allocate cognitive resources effectively towards achieving our objectives. The ability to articulate goals internally, to break down complex tasks into manageable steps, and to provide ourselves with internal feedback is a hallmark of effective self-regulation, demonstrating the inner monologue's profound influence on our capacity for disciplined action and sustained effort. Furthermore, the inner voice plays a significant role in memory and learning. We often silently rehearse new information to consolidate it into long-term memory, or internally recite facts to aid recall. This verbal encoding and retrieval mechanism is a common strategy for academic learning and skill acquisition. Consider the silent repetition of a phone number or a new vocabulary word. This internal vocalization strengthens neural pathways and enhances retention. Similarly, when we reflect on past experiences, our inner monologue often reconstructs events, narrating them to ourselves, thereby reinforcing memories and extracting lessons for future application. The inner monologue is not solely a cognitive workhorse, it is also an indispensable tool for emotional processing and regulation. Our internal dialogues provide a private space to articulate, explore, and make sense of our feelings. When we experience joy, sadness, anger, or anxiety, we often verbalize these emotions internally, giving them form and context. This internal articulation can be a first step towards understanding the root causes of our emotional states, allowing us to process complex feelings without immediate external expression. Moreover, self-talk is a powerful mechanism for coping and emotional soothing. In moments of stress or distress, we might engage in self-compassionate dialogue, offering ourselves words of comfort, encouragement, or reassurance. Phrases like, "It's going to be okay," "You've handled worse," or "just breathe" are common internal responses to emotional turbulence, serving to de-escalate anxiety and foster resilience. Conversely, the ability to reframe challenging situations through internal dialogue allows us to alter our emotional responses, transforming potentially overwhelming experiences into manageable ones. Beyond individual cognition and emotion, the inner monologue is intimately involved in identity formation and social cognition. Our internal narrative is a continuous story we tell ourselves about who we are, what we believe, and where we belong. This ongoing self-narration shapes our self-concept, integrating past experiences, present perceptions, and future aspirations into a coherent sense of self. It is through this internal dialogue that we interrogate our values, reflect on our actions, and construct a personal identity that evolves over time. In a social context, the inner voice becomes a private arena for social rehearsal. We mentally practice conversations, anticipate the reactions of others, and formulate our responses, thereby refining our social skills and navigating interpersonal dynamics more effectively. This internal preparation can reduce social anxiety, enhance communication, and foster empathy by allowing us to mentally step into another's shoes and imagine their perspective. However, the nature of this internal dialogue is not uniformly beneficial. We recognize a spectrum of self-talk, ranging from adaptive to maladaptive patterns. Positive self-talk is characterized by encouraging, affirming, and constructive internal statements. It fosters self-efficacy, boosts confidence, and promotes a growth mindset. Athletes, for instance, frequently utilize positive self-talk to enhance performance, focusing on instructional cues or motivational affirmations. Students might employ it to overcome academic challenges, and individuals facing personal setbacks often rely on it to cultivate resilience. This form of self-talk is a powerful resource for personal development and well-being, aligning with the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, which emphasize the restructuring of thought patterns. Conversely, negative self-talk can manifest as harsh self-criticism, pervasive rumination, or catastrophic thinking. While a degree of self-reflection and critical evaluation is healthy, persistent negative internal dialogue can become profoundly detrimental. Rumination, for example, involves repetitive and passive focusing on symptoms of distress and possible causes and consequences, rather than on solutions. This can exacerbate feelings of anxiety and depression, trapping individuals in a cycle of despair. Self-criticism, when excessive, can erode self-esteem, stifle initiative, and foster a fear of failure. These maladaptive patterns of inner speech highlight the dual potential of our internal world, a source of strength or a wellspring of suffering, depending on its content and our relationship to it. It is crucial to differentiate between the universal experience of inner speech and certain clinical phenomena, such as auditory verbal hallucinations, AVH, which are often mistakenly conflated with talking to oneself. While both involve an internal experience of voice, AVH typically involves hearing voices that are perceived as external, intrusive, and often beyond one's control, characteristic of conditions like schizophrenia. Normal inner speech, conversely, is generally perceived as originating from within one's own mind, is subject to volitional control, and is integrated into one's sense of self. Nonetheless, neuroscientific research indicates some shared neural pathways, particularly in language processing regions, suggesting a complex interplay between the mechanisms underlying internal speech and those involved in the generation of perceived external voices. Understanding this distinction is vital to appreciate the vast spectrum of internal vocalization without pathologizing the normative and often highly adaptive function of self-talk. From a neuroscientific perspective, the internal monologue is not an ethereal concept, but is grounded in tangible brain activity. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, studies reveal that inner speech activates many of the same brain regions involved in overt speech production and comprehension, including areas within the prefrontal cortex, temporal lobes, and parietal lobes. This neural overlap reinforces the idea that inner speech is a form of language, albeit one directed internally, utilizing the same sophisticated machinery that allows us to communicate with others. The prefrontal cortex, in particular, is heavily implicated in executive functions such as planning, working memory, and self-regulation, underscoring its role in orchestrating our internal dialogues for complex cognitive tasks. In sum, contemporary psychology illuminates the inner monologue as an extraordinarily sophisticated and multifaceted cognitive architecture. It is an essential tool for problem-solving, self-regulation, emotional processing, and the continuous construction of our identity. While capable of fostering growth and resilience, its content and patterns can also become sources of distress, thereby necessitating a mindful engagement with its dynamics. Having explored the pervasive and profound functions of self-talk in our daily lives, we are now poised to delve into the practical strategies and techniques for consciously engaging with and ultimately transforming this vital internal landscape, moving beyond passive reception to active stewardship of our inner voice. Having traversed the intricate landscapes of the inner monologue from both psychological and spiritual vantage points, we now stand at the precipice of practical application. Our exploration thus far has illuminated the profound utility of self-talk in cognitive function, emotional regulation, and identity formation, while simultaneously revealing its potential as a source of suffering and a barrier to deeper truths when left unexamined. The challenge, then, lies not in the eradication of this ubiquitous internal companion, but in its conscious engagement and transformation. This chapter will delve into a synthesis of strategies, drawing from contemporary psychological interventions and time-honored spiritual disciplines, designed to empower us to cultivate a more harmonious and insightful inner landscape, fostering both psychological well-being and spiritual growth. The journey toward mastering the inner voice is fundamentally one of intentionality. Just as Vygotsky observed the internalization of social speech into a tool for self-regulation, we recognize that the conscious direction of this internal dialogue can become a powerful instrument for personal evolution. We move beyond merely understanding its mechanisms to actively shaping its content and influence. Modern psychology offers a robust toolkit for engaging with self-talk, primarily focused on enhancing its adaptive functions and mitigating its maladaptive manifestations. These approaches often center on cultivating awareness and developing cognitive flexibility. One of the most potent psychological strategies for transforming the inner voice is rooted in mindfulness. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, directly addresses the tendency to identify with our thoughts, a concept deeply resonant with the Buddhist principle of non-identification with dukkha and anatta. MBCT teaches us to observe our thoughts and feelings as transient mental events, rather than as definitive statements about ourself or reality. When we practice mindfulness, we create a space between the observer and the observed, allowing the inner monologue to flow without automatic engagement or judgment. We learn to notice the incessant chatter, the planning, the worrying, the criticizing, without being swept away by its current. This practice involves a deliberate shift in perspective. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," we learn to acknowledge, "I am having the thought that I am anxious," or "I am experiencing anxiety." This subtle linguistic reframing, reinforced by meditative practice, can dramatically reduce the grip of negative self-talk. It allows us to recognize that the inner voice is not the entirety of who we are, but rather a stream of mental activity, much like the changing weather. By fostering this witness consciousness, we begin to disentangle our sense of self from the impermanent narratives of the ego, echoing the Vipassana meditation techniques discussed in Chapter 1. The goal is not to silence the voice, which is often an impossible and frustrating endeavor, but to change our relationship to it, to observe its patterns, understand its triggers, and choose whether or not to engage with its content, complementing the observational stance of mindfulness. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, provides direct, actionable techniques for reshaping the content of our inner dialogue. CBT operates on the premise that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are interconnected, and by modifying one, we can influence the others. For those whose inner voice tends towards negativity, self-criticism, or rumination, the maladaptive spectrum of self-talk we identified in Chapter 3, CBT offers structured methods for intervention. A core CBT technique involves the identification of automatic negative thoughts, ANTs. These are the rapid, often unconscious negative judgments or predictions that our inner voice produces. Once identified, the next step is to challenge these thoughts. We are encouraged to ask, is this thought truly accurate? What is the evidence for it? Is there an alternative explanation? What would I say to a friend in this situation? This process, known as cognitive restructuring, systematically dismantles the irrational or distorted elements of negative self-talk. Furthermore, CBT emphasizes thought records, where individuals document their negative thoughts, the situations that trigger them, the emotions they evoke, and then actively reframe them into more balanced or realistic perspectives. For instance, an inner voice proclaiming, "I'm a complete failure," might be reframed to, I made a mistake in this specific instance, but I have learned from it and can improve. This active engagement with the inner narrative transforms it from an unchecked critic into a subject for rational inquiry, aligning with the existentialist call for self-interrogation and responsible meaning-making. Beyond mere neutrality or objective challenging, modern psychological research, particularly from figures like Christine Neff, highlights the transformative power of self-compassion. This approach encourages us to treat ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding we would offer a dear friend facing similar difficulties. When the inner voice becomes harsh or critical, self-compassion invites a different response. Acknowledging the pain, recognizing our shared humanity and imperfection, and offering ourselves soothing words. This actively cultivates a positive and supportive inner dialogue, moving away from punitive self-talk towards a nurturing internal presence. It's a deliberate act of emotional regulation, creating a private sanctuary where feelings can be processed without the added burden of self-judgment. Drawing directly from Vygotsky's insights, we can intentionally employ inner speech for self-regulation and goal attainment. This involves consciously directing our internal monologue to guide behavior, sustain effort, and overcome obstacles. Motivational self-talk such as "I can do this," "keep going," or "I am capable" can significantly impact performance and resilience. Similarly, instructional self-talk, where we mentally rehearse steps or articulate problem-solving strategies, enhances cognitive function and reduces errors by consciously structuring our internal narrative around goals and tasks. We harness the inner voice as an essential tool for planning, execution, and memory consolidation, as outlined in Chapter 3. This is not about suppressing the voice, but about channeling its immense power towards constructive ends. While psychological approaches often focus on managing and reframing the content of the inner voice, spiritual traditions offer pathways to transcend its limitations entirely, moving towards a state of consciousness unburdened by the ego's incessant narratives. These practices aim for a deeper realization of self beyond the transient stream of thoughts. Meditation, in its myriad forms, remains the cornerstone of spiritual transformation of the inner voice. We have previously touched upon Vipassana's role in non-identification. Further contemplative practices deepen this engagement. Samatha Vipassana. This foundational Buddhist practice combines calm abiding, samatha, with insight, vipassana. Samatha involves focusing the mind on a single object, often the breath, to quiet the chitta vritti mind fluctuations that Hindu philosophy identifies as obscuring Atman. As the mind settles, the incessant chatter naturally subsides, creating a fertile ground for vipassana, which then observes the arising and passing of thoughts without attachment, leading to profound insights into the impermanent nature of reality and the self. Transcendental meditation, TM. Utilizing a personalized mantra, TM aims to effortlessly guide the mind beyond active thought to a state of restful alertness, or pure consciousness. This systematic practice is believed to naturally dissolve deeply ingrained stress and quiet the ordinary mental noise, providing direct experience of a silent, expansive inner space. Zazen, Zen Buddhism. Often translated as just sitting, Zazen encourages practitioners to sit in a specific posture, observing thoughts as they arise and pass without engaging them, returning gently to the breath. This practice cultivates a spacious awareness that recognizes the inner voice as merely one aspect of consciousness, rather than its totality. These meditative traditions underscore a shared objective: to shift our identification from the ever-changing stream of thoughts to the silent, expansive awareness that underlies them. This is not a forced suppression, but a gentle reorientation of attention, allowing the inner monologue to recede from the foreground of our experience. From the Christian mystical tradition, contemplative prayer and its modern iteration, centering prayer, offer a distinct yet analogous approach to transforming the inner voice. As explored in Chapter 2, Christian mystics viewed the inner voice as a potential barrier to direct communion with God. These practices involve choosing a sacred word or phrase as a symbol of one's intention to consent to God's presence and action within. When the mind is distracted by thoughts, memories, or internal dialogue, one gently returns to the sacred word, not as a mantra to be repeated, but as an anchor to intentional silence. This process gradually purifies the egoic narratives, creating a receptive inner space for the still, small voice of divine presence to emerge, moving beyond discursive thought into an intuitive, unmediated experience. Sufi wisdom, with its emphasis on purifying the nafs, ego self, provides another powerful method for transforming the inner voice through dhikr, remembrance of God. This practice involves the rhythmic repetition of divine names or phrases, often accompanied by specific breath patterns or movements. The sustained focus on the dhikr acts as a powerful counterforce to the ego's incessant chatter, redirecting mental energy away from worldly concerns and self-referential narratives. As the dhikr deepens, it gradually quiets the nafs, leading practitioners towards fana, annihilation of the ego in the divine presence, a state where the individual's inner voice merges with a larger divine consciousness. The repetition, therefore, is not merely mechanical, but a profound spiritual exercise designed to reorient the entire being. Hindu philosophy, particularly through the lens of yoga and Vedanta, offers practices that directly address the chitta vritti, the fluctuations of the mind that comprise much of our inner monologue. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras famously define yoga as chitta vritti nirodha, the cessation of the modifications of the mind. While meditation is central to this, pranayama, yogic breath control, plays a crucial preparatory role. By consciously regulating the breath, practitioners gain control over the vital life force, prana, which is intimately linked to mental activity. As the breath becomes steady and refined, the mind naturally follows suit, becoming calmer and less prone to incessant internal chatter. This physical and energetic discipline creates a foundation for deeper meditative states, allowing the inner voice to quiet and the pure consciousness of Atman to be realized. A particularly direct and radical approach found in Advaita Vedanta, championed by figures like Ramana Maharshi, is, quote, 38. Instead of trying to suppress thoughts, one turns the inner voice upon itself, specifically focusing on the, quote, thought. When the inner voice says, quote, por 40 or por, quote, 41, the practice is to ask, quote, 42, by constantly tracing the, quote, 43, back to its source. The mind eventually turns inward and dissolves, revealing the true, non-dual self beyond the individual ego and its narrative. This is a profound and direct method of transcending the egoic voice by dismantling its very foundation. It is crucial to recognize that these psychological strategies and spiritual disciplines are not mutually exclusive. Rather, they offer complementary pathways to a more conscious relationship with our inner voice. Psychological interventions often provide the initial tools for managing the more disruptive or maladaptive aspects of self-talk, helping to stabilize our emotional and cognitive landscape. They teach us to identify, challenge, and reframe negative thoughts, and to consciously employ inner speech for self-regulation. This work is foundational, creating a healthier internal environment. Spiritual practices, in turn, often build upon this foundation, inviting us to delve deeper into the nature of consciousness itself. They guide us beyond mere management of thought content to a profound shift in our identification with the inner voice. While CBT might help us change the sentence, quote 44 to quote 45, meditation or self-inquiry aims to reveal that these quote 40, making either statement is not our ultimate reality. The journey is one from managing the voice to transcending its egoic grip, from being the voice to witnessing it, and ultimately to recognizing the silent, expansive awareness that precedes and encompasses all thought. The concept of quote 47 or quote 48, the ability to observe our thoughts and feelings without being consumed by them, serves as a powerful bridge between these two domains. Both mindfulness-based therapies and various meditative traditions cultivate this capacity. It is through this cultivated awareness that we learn to discern the different voices within, the critical ego, the planning mind, the compassionate self, and the deeper, quieter wisdom that spiritual traditions identify as the true self or divine presence. Transforming our relationship with the inner voice is not a passive endeavor, but an active, ongoing practice. It requires consistent intentionality and dedication. Just as we train a muscle, we must train our attention and our internal dialogue. The inner voice, having been a largely unconscious companion for much of our lives, requires patient and persistent re-education. There will be moments of frustration, lapses into old patterns, and the persistent return of familiar narratives. Yet, each moment of conscious engagement, whether through mindful observation, cognitive restructuring, self-compassion, or deep contemplation, reinforces new pathways and strengthens our capacity for inner mastery. The insights gleaned from both ancient wisdom and modern science converge on a profound truth. Our inner voice, far from being a mere background hum, is a dynamic and malleable aspect of our being. By consciously engaging with its multifaceted architecture, we unlock not only enhanced psychological well-being, but also a deeper connection to the universal currents of consciousness. The journey inward, guided by these integrated strategies, promises not the eradication of self-talk, but its evolution into a wise companion, a discerning guide, and ultimately, a transparent gateway to the profound silence and expansive awareness that lie at the heart of our existence. As we have journeyed through the intricate landscapes of the inner monologue, from its developmental origins and cognitive functions to its spiritual implications and practical management, we arrive now at a crucial juncture. The profound possibilities that emerge when we consciously engage with and actively transform this constant companion. Chapter 4 illuminated the synergistic pathways, psychological and spiritual, that enable us to shift from passive identification with our inner voice to an active, discerning relationship. This intentional practice, we contend, does not merely quiet the mind. it fundamentally refines the very nature of our internal dialogue, transforming it from a potential source of distraction and suffering into a wellspring of wisdom, clarity, and integrated being. The ultimate aim of this conscious engagement is not to eradicate the inner voice entirely, but to elevate its quality, to purify its intent, and to align it with a deeper, more expansive awareness. When the psychological tools of mindfulness, cognitive reframing, and self-compassion are harmonized with spiritual disciplines such as meditation, contemplative prayer, or self-inquiry, a remarkable metamorphosis occurs. The cacophony of unexamined thoughts begins to subside, yielding to a more discerning and coherent internal narrative. This transformed inner voice is characterized by several key attributes, each contributing to a more harmonious and purposeful existence. Firstly, the transformed inner voice embodies clarity and precision. Gone are the days of aimless rumination, the recursive loops of anxiety, or the vague, undifferentiated stream of consciousness. Instead, our internal dialogue becomes a finely tuned instrument, capable of articulating thoughts with remarkable lucidity. When faced with a complex problem, the transformed voice does not descend into panic or confusion. Rather, it guides us through a systematic process of analysis, breaking down challenges into manageable components, identifying core issues, and formulating potential solutions with an almost surgical precision. This is not simply a matter of improved cognitive function, though that is certainly a benefit. It is an epistemological shift, where the inner narrative serves as a direct conduit for understanding, cutting through ambiguity and revealing underlying truths. We find ourselves less prone to cognitive biases, as the voice, now less ego-driven, is more open to objective reasoning and diverse perspectives. Secondly, a hallmark of the refined inner monologue is its inherent compassion and self-kindness. The relentless self-critic, often a dominant persona within the untamed inner landscape, gradually recedes. In its place emerges a nurturing presence, one that offers encouragement, understanding, and unconditional acceptance. This shift is profoundly liberating. Instead of dwelling on perceived failures or shortcomings, the compassionate inner voice frames challenges as opportunities for growth, mistakes as invaluable lessons, and vulnerability as a pathway to authentic connection. This cultivated self-compassion is not a form of self-indulgence, but a strategic psychological and spiritual tool. It builds resilience, fosters emotional regulation, and empowers us to navigate life's inevitable difficulties with grace and fortitude. Psychologically, this aligns with theories of self-acceptance and positive psychology. Spiritually, it echoes the universal principle of loving kindness, extending inwardly before radiating outward. Thirdly, the transformed voice becomes a powerful channel for intuition and insight. As the incessant chatter diminishes, a deeper intelligence, often obscured by surface-level thought, begins to surface. This is the intuitive faculty, a direct knowing that transcends linear logic. The inner voice, no longer merely reflecting external stimuli or regurgitating learned information, starts to articulate profound insights, creative solutions, and sudden flashes of understanding that seem to emerge from beyond our conscious processing. This is particularly evident in moments of quiet contemplation or during focused creative endeavors, where the inner monologue acts as a translator for these deeper promptings. It might offer a novel perspective on a long-standing dilemma, reveal the hidden motives behind a complex interaction, or inspire a groundbreaking artistic concept. This intuitive guidance, often felt as a gentle nudge or a clear inner knowing, is a testament to the mind's capacity to access information from subtler realms of consciousness, whether understood as the collective unconscious, divine inspiration, or simply the integrated processing of vast amounts of subconscious data. Finally, the transformed inner voice is profoundly purposeful and constructive. It ceases to be a reactive echo chamber of external events or an arena for internal conflict. Instead, it becomes an active agent in shaping our reality, guiding our actions with intentionality and aligning them with our deepest values and aspirations. This voice is less frequent, yet far more potent. Each utterance carries weight. Each internal statement is a deliberate choice. It assists in setting meaningful goals, cultivating positive habits, and maintaining focus amidst distractions. When we speak to ourselves internally, it is often in the service of growth, learning, or contribution. This is the inner mentor, the wise guide that helps us navigate ethical dilemmas, make difficult decisions, and stay true to our authentic selves. The shift here is from an inner monologue that happens to us to one that we consciously co-create, making it a powerful instrument for self-mastery and the actualization of our potential. Beyond the refinement of the inner voice itself, one of the most significant outcomes of this transformative work is the emergence of a profound inner silence. This is not merely the absence of thought, nor is it the suppression of mental activity, which often leads to a rebound effect. Instead, it is a rich, fertile void, a spacious awareness that underlies and encompasses all mental phenomena. This silence is not empty. It is pregnant with possibility, a wellspring of creativity and a sanctuary of peace. It is the experiential realization of the gap between thoughts, the still point that many spiritual traditions describe as the gateway to deeper truth. In this profound inner silence, we discover a capacity for deeper listening. We begin to hear not just the overt words of others, but the unspoken emotions, the underlying intentions, and the subtle nuances of human connection. We also learn to listen more acutely to the silent promptings of our own being, the whispers of intuition, the quiet stirrings of our soul, the subtle signals of our body. This receptive silence is where true wisdom resides, for it is only when the mind is quiet that we can truly perceive reality as it is, uncoloured by our projections, biases, or desires. This is the listening space where a deeper dialogue with ourselves, with others, and with the universal intelligence can truly unfold. The ripple effects of cultivating this transformed voice and embracing profound inner silence extend far beyond our internal experience, profoundly impacting our integrated being and enhancing our daily living. Emotional resilience is significantly strengthened. When the inner critic is muted and replaced by a compassionate guide, our capacity to weather life's storms increases exponentially. We become less susceptible to emotional hijacking, able to observe intense feelings without being overwhelmed by them, and to return to a state of equanimity more swiftly. The inner voice, when aligned with wisdom, provides a steady anchor amidst turbulent emotional seas, offering perspective and soothing balm. Enhanced decision-making becomes a natural consequence. With clarity, intuition, and a quiet mind, our choices are no longer driven by fear, impulse, or external pressure. Instead, they emanate from a place of deep alignment, reflecting our authentic values and leading to outcomes that are more beneficial for ourselves and for those around us. The inner silence provides the space for options to be weighed without prejudice, and the transformed voice offers incisive analysis. Our relationships undergo a remarkable transformation. When we are less preoccupied with our own internal noise, we become truly present for others. Our capacity for empathy deepens as we are better able to listen, understand, and respond with genuine compassion. Communication becomes more authentic, conflicts are navigated with greater understanding, and bonds are forged on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine connection. The transformed inner voice, having learned self-compassion, naturally extends this grace outward. Creativity and innovation flourish in this enriched inner landscape. The fertile void of inner silence is the birthplace of novel ideas, artistic inspiration, and groundbreaking solutions. When the mind is not cluttered with incessant chatter, it becomes a clear vessel for creative impulses to flow through, unhindered by self-doubt or rigid thinking. The transformed inner voice serves as a supportive collaborator, encouraging exploration and experimentation. Ultimately, this journey cultivates a profound sense of purpose and meaning. As our inner world becomes more coherent and aligned, our external actions naturally follow suit. We find ourselves drawn to activities and contributions that resonate with our deepest values, leading to a life imbued with significance and fulfillment. The internal dialogue, now a wise companion, helps us articulate our purpose and navigate the path toward its realization. This holistic well-being encompasses not just mental and emotional health, but also a spiritual vitality that permeates every aspect of our existence, sometimes even manifesting in improved physical health as the stress of internal conflict diminishes. It is crucial to emphasize that this transformation is an ongoing practice of conscious awareness, not a destination to be reached and then abandoned. The inner landscape is dynamic, constantly influenced by external circumstances and internal states. Therefore, continuous vigilance, self-reflection, and the consistent application of both psychological tools and spiritual disciplines are essential. The inner companion evolves from a mere reflection of our ego to a wise guide, or even an inner mentor, a deeply integrated aspect of our higher self, always available for counsel, encouragement, and insight. The integration of psychological self-management with spiritual transcendence remains the cornerstone of this journey. Psychology offers the maps and tools to navigate the terrain of the mind, helping us understand its mechanisms and manage its more challenging aspects. Spirituality provides the compass, pointing toward the ultimate destination of expansive awareness, guiding us to transcend the limitations of the ego and identify with the boundless self. Together, they offer a holistic framework for transforming our relationship with the inner monologue, shifting our identification from the fleeting thoughts themselves to the underlying consciousness that observes them. In conclusion, the journey of understanding and transforming the inner monologue is perhaps one of the most profound endeavors a human being can undertake. It is a journey from unconscious reaction to conscious response, from fragmentation to integration, from noise to profound silence, and ultimately from a limited sense of self to an expansive, interconnected being. The people who talk to themselves, whether overtly or internally, are not merely engaging in an idiosyncratic behavior. They are participating in a universal human phenomenon that, when consciously engaged, holds the key to unlocking extraordinary levels of wisdom, compassion, and integrated well-being. This transformation, we contend, is not an esoteric pursuit but a fundamental pathway to human flourishing and spiritual awakening, offering a roadmap for living a life of greater presence, purpose, and peace. The journey toward a transformed voice, as we have explored, is not a finite destination but an ongoing practice of conscious awareness, demanding continuous vigilance and the thoughtful integration of both psychological and spiritual disciplines. This profound undertaking, far from being a mere intellectual exercise, manifests as a dynamic, living process that reshapes our internal landscape and, consequently, our engagement with the external world. We now turn our attention to the practicalities of this integration, examining how these diverse strategies coalesce into a synergistic whole, and the profound reverberations of such a transformation within the individual and collective experience. The cultivation of conscious awareness, the bedrock of this integrated approach, is not confined to moments of formal meditation or therapeutic intervention. Rather, it permeates the fabric of daily existence, a continuous thread woven through our waking hours. It begins with the simple yet revolutionary act of metacognition, the observation of one's own thought processes. We learn to step back from the incessant stream of inner monologue, not to suppress it, but to witness it without immediate identification or judgment. This practice, deeply rooted in mindfulness-based approaches, teaches us that we are not merely our thoughts, we are the awareness that observes them. When the inner critic arises, we acknowledge its presence without internalizing its pronouncements. When anxiety whispers its familiar tales of future catastrophe, we recognize it as a transient mental event, distinct from our core being. This vigilant observation transforms the inner voice from an unconscious dictator into an observable phenomenon, a subject for curious inquiry rather than passive reception. Psychological disciplines such as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, provide the initial scaffolding for this vigilance. MBCT trains us in the art of present-moment awareness, anchoring us in the sensory experience of, quote, 55, quote, and diminishing the pull of rumination. We learn to notice the physical sensations accompanying certain thoughts, the emotional charge they carry and their ephemeral nature. CBT, conversely, equips us with the tools to actively challenge maladaptive thought patterns, questioning their validity and utility. It teaches us to dissect the narratives spun by our inner voice, identifying cognitive distortions and constructing more balanced, realistic perspectives. These techniques, initially applied as structured exercises, gradually become internalized capacities, forming the basis of an agile and responsive mind. Yet, it is in the synergistic integration with spiritual wisdom that these psychological tools transcend mere symptom management and contribute to a more profound transformation. While CBT helps us reframe negative thoughts, spiritual practices like vipassana or self-inquiry invite us to question the very source of those thoughts, to inquire into the nature of the, quote, 56 that claims ownership of them. For instance, challenging a self-deprecating thought, a CBT technique, becomes even more potent when coupled with the spiritual insight that the quote, 57 generating such criticism is a construct, an egoic manifestation rather than our true expansive essence. We move from merely changing the content of the thought to fundamentally altering our relationship with the thought generator itself. Conversely, spiritual insights can significantly enhance the efficacy of psychological interventions. The Buddhist principle of anatta, non-self for example, provides a profound framework for disidentifying from the ego-driven narratives that often fuel anxiety and depression. When we understand that our inner monologue is largely a product of conditioning, a collection of learned responses and self-definitions, the grip of negative self-talk loosens considerably. Self-compassion, a psychological pillar, finds deeper resonance when informed by the spiritual understanding of universal interconnectedness. Recognizing our inherent worth as part of a larger sacred whole naturally fosters an inner voice that is nurturing and kind, rather than harsh and demanding. The psychological imperative to quote 58 quote transforms into a spiritual recognition of quote 59 quote. This integrated practice leads to a profound shift in the very nature of the inner voice, fostering what we term the quote 60 quote, a voice characterized by clarity, compassion, intuition, and purpose. Clarity emerges as the incessant mental chatter subsides. The mind, no longer a cacophony of competing thoughts and anxieties, becomes a clearer instrument. Decisions are made with greater discernment, unclouded by the emotional turbulence of an uncontrolled inner dialogue. We find ourselves able to focus more effectively, to process information more efficiently, and to articulate our thoughts with precision and coherence. This clarity is not merely intellectual, it is an existential clarity, a deeper understanding of our values, priorities, and true desires, unmasked from the layers of societal conditioning and egoic striving. Compassion, both for oneself and for others, becomes the default mode of the transformed inner voice. The harsh self-criticism, the incessant judgment, and the internal narratives of inadequacy begin to dissolve. In their place arises an inner dialogue imbued with understanding, forgiveness, and unconditional acceptance. This internal shift inevitably ripples outward, fostering genuine empathy and patience in our interactions with others. We recognize the shared human struggle, understanding that others too are navigating their own inner landscapes, often grappling with an untamed inner voice. This recognition cultivates a profound sense of connection and reduces the tendency toward judgment and separation. Intuition, often obscured by the noise of the rational mind and the dictates of the ego, begins to surface with remarkable potency. When the analytical mind is not constantly engaged in problem-solving or self-commentary, a deeper intelligence, a subtle knowing, can emerge. This intuitive guidance often presents itself as a quiet inner prompting, a sudden insight, or a strong sense of rightness that transcends logical deduction. Spiritual traditions have long spoken of this quote 61 or the wisdom of the heart. Through practices that quiet the mind and foster presence, we learn to discern this intuitive guidance from mere impulse or egoic desire, trusting its inherent wisdom to illuminate our path. Finally, a profound sense of gyokwe. Purpose crystallizes when the inner voice is no longer dominated by external pressures, fear, or the pursuit of fleeting gratification. Our authentic aspirations come into focus. The transformed voice speaks of our true calling, our unique contribution to the world, and the values that genuinely animate our lives. This purpose is not externally imposed, but organically arises from a deeper connection to self and to something larger than oneself. It provides a foundational sense of direction, grounding our actions in meaning and infusing our existence with profound significance. The ripple effects of this holistic transformation extend far beyond the individual's internal experience, permeating every aspect of their life. We observe a significant increase in the emotional resilience, the capacity to navigate life's inevitable challenges without being overwhelmed by destructive self-talk. Setbacks are viewed as opportunities for growth rather than personal failures. Grief and loss are processed with greater presence and acceptance, allowing for healthy integration rather than prolonged suffering. Enhanced decision-making becomes a natural outcome of a clear, compassionate and intuitive inner guide. Choices are made not from a place of fear or scarcity, but from a deeper alignment with one's values and wisdom. The internal debate that often paralyzes action is replaced by a calm assessment and a confident move forward, guided by an inner compass that points toward authenticity and well-being. Furthermore, improved relationships are an inevitable consequence of an integrated inner world. When our inner dialogue is more compassionate and less critical, we project less onto others. We listen more deeply, communicate more clearly, and engage with greater empathy and understanding. The need for external validation diminishes, allowing for more authentic and less codependent connections, fostering relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love. The freeing of mental space, a direct result of quieting the incessant chatter, unleashes boosted creativity. The mind, no longer burdened by rumination or self-criticism, becomes a fertile ground for novel ideas, innovative solutions, and artistic expression. Inspiration flows more freely, unhindered by the internal censor or the fear of judgment. Ultimately, the integrated practice culminates in a powerful and unwavering, strong sense of purpose. Living authentically, guided by an inner compass rather than external validation, becomes the natural mode of being. This purpose is not a rigid dogma, but an evolving, deeply personal understanding of one's place and contribution, fueling a life lived with passion, integrity, and profound meaning. This profound journey takes us beyond the initial premise of merely, quote, 62, quote, to a state of, quote, 63, quote, in the most expansive and interconnected sense. The transformation of the inner voice is, in essence, a transformation of consciousness itself. It moves us from an identification with the fragmented egoic self, the collection of thoughts and conditioned responses, to a realization of an underlying boundless awareness. This is the quote 64 that spiritual traditions have long described, a state of unity, where the boundaries between self and other, individual and universal, begin to dissolve. The inner monologue, once a source of division and suffering, becomes a conduit for wisdom, compassion, and a profound sense of belonging to the intricate tapestry of existence. This ongoing practice of conscious awareness, therefore, is not merely about managing our thoughts. It is about reclaiming our true nature, fostering a profound resonance with the universal current of being. The journey from the cacophony of an unexamined inner monologue to the profound resonance of, quote, 65, quote, is not a finite destination, but an eternal unfolding, a continuous symphony of consciousness. As we have explored, the transformation from a fragmented ego to a boundless, interconnected awareness is a shift of profound magnitude, yet it is never truly complete. It is an ongoing practice, a sacred dance between the silence that grounds us and the refined inner voice that guides us. We recognize that the cessation of chitta vritti, the modifications of the mind, is not a permanent voiding of all thought, but rather a state where thought no longer holds us captive, where the inner monologue, when it arises, does so in service of our higher self, imbued with clarity, compassion, and purpose. This ongoing practice demands a vigilant yet gentle awareness, an unwavering commitment to metacognition. The psychological tools of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, continue to serve as invaluable instruments for observing and reshaping the contours of our inner landscape. They help us to identify the subtle resurgence of old patterns, the insidious whispers of self-doubt, or the seductive pull of rumination. Yet, these tools are elevated and deepened by the spiritual insights that reveal the ephemeral nature of the ego and the boundless expanse of consciousness. The Buddhist concept of anatta, the non-self, remains a potent antidote to identification with fleeting thoughts and emotions, reminding us that we are the spacious awareness in which these phenomena arise and subside, not the phenomena themselves. The transformed inner voice, then, is not eradicated but transmuted. It becomes a sophisticated instrument, capable of nuanced reflection, intuitive guidance, and compassionate self-dialogue. It is the voice of the wise mentor within, speaking not from the limited perspective of past conditioning or future anxieties, but from the timeless wisdom of the present moment. This refined inner monologue operates in harmony with silence, emerging when needed for planning, problem-solving, or creative expression, and gracefully receding when its task is complete, allowing the profound inner stillness to prevail. It is a dynamic interplay, a breath-like rhythm of inner speech and inner silence, each enriching the other. We learn to discern the authentic promptings of our deeper self from the residual echoes of egoic chatter, cultivating an internal environment where truth can flourish. The implications of this individual transformation extend far beyond the confines of personal well-being. An integrated being, one who has consciously engaged with and refined their inner monologue, becomes a beacon of clarity and compassion in the world. The shift from a fragmented ego to an interconnected awareness naturally fosters a profound sense of empathy and understanding. When we cease to be defined solely by our individual narratives and begin to experience ourselves as part of a larger universal consciousness, the perceived boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. This dissolution of boundaries leads to more authentic and harmonious relationships. The inner critic, once directed inward, loses its power, and consequently, the tendency to project judgment outward diminishes. Instead, a genuine curiosity and acceptance of others emerge. Communication becomes clearer, unburdened by the ego's need for validation or control. Conflicts are approached not as battles to be won, but as opportunities for mutual understanding and growth. The capacity for deep listening, cultivated through attention to one's own inner landscape, translates into a profound ability to hear and understand the perspectives of others, even when they differ from our own. Furthermore, The integration of the inner voice empowers individuals to contribute more meaningfully to their communities and to the broader tapestry of human society. Decision-making, no longer clouded by fear or self-interest, aligns with a greater good. Creativity, accessed through the fertile void of inner silence, flows unimpeded, offering innovative solutions to complex challenges. A strong sense of purpose, rooted in an understanding of one's interconnectedness with all life, motivates action that is both ethical and impactful. These individuals become agents of positive change, embodying the very qualities, compassion, wisdom, resilience, that are so desperately needed in our increasingly complex world. Consider the collective impact if this journey were embraced by a significant portion of humanity. The current global challenges, conflict, environmental degradation, social injustice, are often rooted in the fragmentation of the ego, in the inability to see beyond immediate self-interest, group identity, or nationalistic narratives. A world populated by more integrated beings would be one where collective consciousness is elevated, where shared values of empathy, sustainability, and mutual respect naturally guide our actions. The us vs them mentality, a direct product of an unexamined, fear-driven ego, would gradually give way to a recognition of our shared humanity, our intrinsic interconnectedness. The vision we hold for the future of human consciousness is one where the conscious cultivation of the inner monologue is not an esoteric practice but an integral part of human development and education. Imagine educational systems that not only impart external knowledge but also guide students in understanding and navigating their internal worlds. Imagine societies that prioritize inner well-being and spiritual intelligence as much as, if not more than, material acquisition and external achievement. In such a future, the foundational insights of psychology and the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions would converge in a holistic approach to human flourishing. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a logical extrapolation of the profound potential revealed by our exploration. When individuals learn to master their internal landscape, they unlock an immense reservoir of human potential, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. The people who talk to themselves are not merely engaging in an idiosyncratic behavior. They are, often unconsciously, tapping into a fundamental human faculty. Our task, as we have argued throughout this essay, is to bring this faculty into conscious awareness, to transform it from a default setting into a deliberate instrument of growth and liberation. The ongoing practice, therefore, is not merely about personal transformation. It is about contributing to the evolution of human consciousness itself. Each individual who undertakes this journey, who commits to refining their inner monologue and cultivating inner silence, adds a unique thread to the evolving tapestry of collective awareness. This is the ultimate synthesis of our inquiry, the recognition that the inner monologue, often dismissed or misunderstood, is in fact a sacred crucible, a laboratory of consciousness where the raw material of thought can be refined into the gold of wisdom. In closing, we reiterate that the inner monologue, whether overt or covert, is a universal human phenomenon, an essential companion on our journey through life. Far from being a mere psychological quirk, it is a profound expression of our cognitive, emotional, and spiritual essence. From the developmental theories of Vygotsky and Piaget to the neuroscientific mapping of its linguistic foundations, psychology offers us the framework to understand its functional utility. Yet, it is the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions, Buddhism, Christian mysticism, Sufism, Hinduism, and existential thought that illuminates its deeper significance, revealing it as both a potential source of suffering and a potent pathway to liberation. The integration of these perspectives provides us with a comprehensive map for navigating our internal worlds. Psychological tools offer the means to manage the maladaptive aspects of self-talk, transforming negative patterns into constructive dialogue. Spiritual practices, meanwhile, invite us to transcend the egoic narrative altogether, guiding us towards a spacious awareness that underlies all thought, a profound inner silence where the true self resides. This dual approach fosters a transformed inner voice, one characterized by clarity, compassion, intuition, and purpose, and cultivates a deep inner stillness that is the wellspring of creativity, peace, and profound insight. The journey from talking to oneself to being oneself is an ongoing dynamic process. It is a commitment to conscious awareness, to the continuous refinement of our internal landscape, and to the unwavering pursuit of truth. It is a recognition that our inner world is not a static entity but a living, breathing symphony, constantly evolving, constantly inviting us to listen more deeply, to speak more wisely, and to dwell more fully in the boundless interconnectedness of all being. This is the eternal echo of the self, calling us home, inviting us to partake in the harmonious unfolding of existence. May we all heed its call, and in doing so, contribute to a world resonating with peace, wisdom, and universal compassion. As we stand at the precipice of our comprehensive inquiry, having traversed the intricate landscapes of the inner monologue, from its psychological underpinnings to its spiritual transcendence, we arrive at a crucial synthesis. The journey through self-talk, silence, and spirit is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is a profound blueprint for the evolution of human consciousness. The unfolding symphony of being, as we previously termed it, signifies a dynamic interplay, a harmonious integration where the refined inner voice and the expansive inner stillness coalesce to forge a new paradigm of human existence. This chapter seeks to articulate the culmination of this transformative process, exploring the profound implications for individual self-realization and the collective future of humanity. We have observed how the inner monologue, initially perceived as a ubiquitous, often unconscious stream of thought, can be both a powerful tool for cognitive function and a significant source of psychological fragmentation and suffering when unexamined. The foundational work of Vygotsky and Piaget illuminated its role in development, while various spiritual traditions, from Buddhist anatta to Sufi nafs, identified its egoic nature as a veil obscuring deeper truth. Our exploration of contemporary psychology provided actionable strategies for engagement, distinguishing adaptive self-talk from maladaptive rumination, and offering pathways such as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy to reframe its content. Simultaneously, spiritual disciplines like vipassana, contemplative prayer, dhikr, and self-inquiry provided methods for transcending identification with the voice itself, leading to the cultivation of profound inner silence. The integration of these diverse perspectives is not an arbitrary juxtaposition, but a necessary and organic convergence. Psychology offers the empirical framework and practical tools for managing the mechanics of the inner voice, helping us to understand its genesis, its functions, and its distortions. Spirituality, conversely, provides the context and the purpose, guiding us towards a deeper understanding of the self that lies beyond the incessant chatter, a self that is interconnected, boundless, and imbued with an inherent wisdom. It is in this fertile ground of integration that the transformed inner voice truly flourishes, becoming an inner mentor, a wise guide, rather than a source of incessant distraction or self-criticism. This transformed voice is characterized by clarity, compassion, intuition, and a profound alignment with one's authentic purpose. It speaks not from the fragmented ego, but from a place of integrated awareness, serving as a bridge between the conscious mind and the deeper reservoirs of unconscious wisdom. The cultivation of inner silence, therefore, is not the eradication of the inner voice, but the creation of a spacious awareness within which the voice can operate with discerning wisdom. This silence is not an absence, but a presence, a profound, resonant stillness that allows for deep listening, both to the subtler whispers of intuition and to the external world with heightened sensitivity. It is within this stillness that genuine insight arises, unclouded by mental noise. This state of integrated consciousness, where a transformed voice converses with an expansive silence, represents a significant shift in the human experience, moving beyond mere functionality to a state of profound flourishing. What, then, are the implications of this integrated consciousness for the individual and for the wider human collective? For the individual, the liberation from the incessant, often negative dictates of the untransformed inner monologue is akin to shedding an immense burden. The energy previously consumed by internal conflict, rumination, and self-doubt is redirected towards creative expression, empathetic connection, and purposeful action. Emotional resilience is significantly enhanced as the individual develops the capacity to observe thoughts and feelings without being swept away by them. Decision-making becomes clearer, rooted in a blend of logical analysis and intuitive wisdom. Relationships deepen as inner peace fosters a greater capacity for presence, compassion, and authentic communication with others. The sense of self shifts from a fragile, ego-bound identity to a more expansive, fluid, and interconnected awareness, leading to a profound sense of intrinsic worth and belonging. Extending beyond the individual, the societal resonance of this transformation is immense. Imagine a collective humanity where a significant portion of its members engage with their inner worlds with such conscious intentionality. Conflict at its root often stems from unexamined inner narratives, projections, and a lack of empathy born from self-preoccupation. A society populated by individuals who possess a transformed inner voice and cultivated inner silence would inherently be more empathetic, more compassionate, and more capable of genuine dialogue and collaboration. Misunderstandings would be addressed with greater clarity and less reactive defensiveness. Creative solutions to complex global challenges would emerge more readily from minds unburdened by internal noise and open to intuitive insights. The collective consciousness would begin to shift from one dominated by fear, competition, and fragmentation to one characterized by cooperation, understanding, and interconnectedness. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a logical extrapolation of the principles we have explored. If individual transformation, as demonstrated, leads to greater empathy, resilience, and purpose, then the aggregation of such transformations must inevitably lead to a more harmonious and evolved collective. The quote 74 is not a mystical abstraction. It is the observable outcome of widespread individual metacognitive and spiritual development. When individuals cease to identify solely with their egoic narratives and instead access a deeper, shared awareness, the very fabric of human interaction begins to reweave itself. Social structures, governance, education, and even economic systems could be reimagined from a place of profound wisdom and interconnected care, rather than from scarcity, power dynamics, or fear. The journey we have outlined, therefore, represents a new human paradigm, a conscious shift in how humanity relates to its own mind, to others, and to the planet. This paradigm recognizes the mind not as a master to be blindly followed, but as a sophisticated instrument to be understood, refined, and ultimately transcended through conscious engagement. It champions a holistic model of human development that embraces both rigorous scientific inquiry and timeless spiritual wisdom, recognizing that both are indispensable for a complete understanding of our internal landscape. Yet, we must reiterate that this journey is not a finite destination, but an quote 75 The dance between the inner voice and inner silence is ceaseless. There is no ultimate quote 76 where the work is done, but rather a continuous process of refinement, deeper listening, and expanding awareness. As consciousness itself is dynamic and ever-evolving, so too is our relationship with our inner world. New challenges will arise, new insights will emerge, and the practice of conscious engagement will remain a vital anchor in the ever-changing tides of existence. The transformed inner voice continues to refine its wisdom, and the inner silence deepens its capacity for boundless awareness, each enriching the other in a perpetual feedback loop of growth. In conclusion, our exploration into the psychology of people who talk to themselves reveals far more than a mere behavioral quirk. It uncovers a universal human phenomenon that holds the key to profound self-realization and collective evolution. By understanding, engaging with, and ultimately transforming our inner monologue, we unlock not only individual potential, but also contribute to the ongoing symphony of human consciousness. The integration of psychological insight and spiritual wisdom offers a compelling pathway towards a future where humanity lives not merely with its inner voice, but through it, as a conduit for wisdom, compassion, and an ever-deepening connection to the boundless, interconnected fabric of being. The invitation remains open to listen, to discern, to transform, and to participate consciously in the grand, unfolding narrative of human becoming. The quote 77, as we have envisioned it, is not a static destination but a dynamic state of perpetual becoming, a continuous process of refinement and integration. The journey of transforming the inner monologue, therefore, extends beyond initial insights and breakthroughs, unfolding as an eternal crucible where consciousness is continually tested, purified, and expanded. In this chapter, we delve into the sustained commitment required for this ongoing evolution, exploring the nuances of maintaining vigilance, navigating the cyclical nature of growth, and deepening the synthesis between psychological understanding and spiritual wisdom throughout a lifetime. We begin by acknowledging that the human mind, by its very nature, is a living, evolving entity, susceptible to new inputs, experiences, and challenges. The inner monologue, though transformed, remains an active faculty designed to engage with the world. The aim is not to eradicate it, but to ensure its alignment with the deeper wisdom cultivated through inner silence. This requires an unwavering commitment to self-awareness, a constant recalibration of our internal compass. The external world relentlessly presents stimuli that can disrupt our equilibrium. Stressors, interpersonal conflicts, societal pressures, and even mundane daily tasks can trigger old patterns of thought, resurrecting the ego's fragmented narratives. Here, the psychological tools we have discussed, mindfulness, CBT techniques, self-compassion, become indispensable for sustained vigilance. Mindfulness, in its essence, is the practice of moment-to-moment awareness. For the individual committed to the new human paradigm, this translates into a heightened sensitivity to the subtle shifts in their internal landscape. We learn to observe the nascent stirrings of judgment, anxiety, or self-doubt before they coalesce into full-blown rumination. This is not a passive observation, but an active, gentle redirection, a conscious choice to disengage from narratives that do not serve our highest good. We ask ourselves, is this thought constructive? Does it align with compassion? Does it lead towards clarity or confusion? This continuous self-interrogation, not born of self-criticism but of genuine inquiry, becomes a cornerstone of our daily practice. Furthermore, the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy offer a robust framework for identifying and challenging the resurgence of maladaptive thought patterns. Even after significant transformation, deeply ingrained cognitive biases or emotional triggers may occasionally surface. We recognize these not as failures, but as opportunities for deeper integration. By consciously applying techniques such as cognitive restructuring, questioning the evidence for negative thoughts, exploring alternative perspectives, and reframing interpretations, we reinforce the pathways of constructive self-talk. This ongoing dialogue with the self is no longer a battle against the ego, but a collaborative effort to maintain mental hygiene and emotional balance. Self-compassion, too, becomes a vital antidote to the inevitable setbacks or moments of internal struggle. The journey of consciousness is not linear. There will be periods of regression, moments when the inner critic seems louder, or when the spaciousness of inner silence feels elusive. During these times, rather than succumbing to self-judgment, we practice extending the same kindness and understanding to ourselves that we would offer a dear friend. This gentle self-acceptance is crucial for sustaining the long-term commitment, preventing burnout and fostering resilience. It is an acknowledgement that the perpetual crucible is also a space of immense grace and forgiveness. The path of inner transformation is rarely a straight ascent. It often resembles a spiral, revisiting themes and challenges at deeper levels of understanding. We may encounter periods of intense clarity and profound inner peace, followed by phases where the mind feels turbulent, or where the transformed voice seems to recede. These cycles are not indicative of failure, but are inherent to the process of growth. From a psychological perspective, these fluctuations can be understood as phases of integration and disintegration. As we assimilate new insights and shift our internal patterns, there can be a period of psychological restructuring, which may feel unsettling. Old coping mechanisms, though no longer serving us, can exert a pull, particularly in times of stress. This is where the wisdom of spiritual traditions offers profound solace and guidance. Many spiritual paths describe the dark night of the soul, or periods of spiritual dryness, not as signs of abandonment, but as necessary phases of purification and deepening. In Christian mysticism, such periods are seen as God's way of stripping away attachments and fostering a more profound reliance on divine grace. In Buddhist thought, the arising of difficult emotions or thoughts is met with equanimity, recognized as impermanent phenomena within the vastness of awareness. Sufi wisdom speaks of the journey through various, quote, 83 of the self, each requiring a new level of surrender and purification of the nafs. These timeless insights teach us that resistance to these cycles only prolongs suffering. Instead, we are invited to embrace them with patience and trust. The quote 84 becomes a mentor during these times, reminding us of our inherent capacity for resilience and our connection to the boundless awareness. It encourages us to lean into the silence, to rest in the spaciousness that underlies all mental activity, even when the mind feels chaotic. This cultivation of trust in the process, a deep faith in the unfolding of consciousness, is paramount for navigating the long haul. The ongoing journey is characterized by an ever-deepening synthesis of psychological and spiritual insights. What begins as a conscious application of techniques gradually evolves into an integrated way of being. The distinction between inner speech and inner silence blurs, not into confusion, but into a seamless flow. The transformed voice speaks from the silence, imbued with its wisdom and clarity, while the silence itself is enriched by the discerning insights of a well-regulated mind. This integrated being manifests in daily life through an enhanced capacity for presence. We find ourselves more fully engaged in our interactions, listening with greater empathy and responding with greater wisdom. The internal noise that once obscured our perception of others and the world diminishes, allowing for a more direct, unmediated experience of reality. This translates into relationships marked by authenticity, where communication is clear and intentions are pure. The ego's need for validation or control recedes, replaced by a genuine desire for connection and understanding. Decision-making becomes more intuitive and aligned with our deepest values. The transformed inner voice, drawing from both rational analysis and intuitive knowing, guides us towards choices that serve not only our individual well-being, but also the greater good. The anxiety of choice, often fueled by an overactive fear-based ego, is replaced by a calm confidence that arises from a deep alignment with purpose. Furthermore, creativity flourishes in this integrated state. When the mind is no longer burdened by incessant chatter or self-judgment, it becomes a fertile ground for novel ideas and innovative solutions. The spaciousness of inner silence acts as a canvas upon which the transformed voice, with its clarity and insight, can paint new possibilities. This is not merely artistic creativity, but a creative approach to life itself, problem-solving, adapting to change, and envisioning a better future. The perpetual crucible ultimately refines our sense of purpose. As we shed the layers of egoic conditioning, our authentic self emerges more clearly, revealing our unique contribution to the world. The inner dialogue shifts from self-preoccupation to a broader engagement with humanity and the planet. We become conduits for compassion, wisdom, and positive change, embodying the very paradigm we seek to establish. This ongoing journey, this eternal unfolding, leads us towards an ever deeper understanding of our interconnectedness. The boundaries between self and other, between individual consciousness and universal consciousness, begin to dissolve. The inner silence, initially experienced as a personal refuge, expands to reveal itself as the ground of all being, the source from which all arises and to which all returns. The transformed inner voice, in turn, becomes a resonance of this infinite wisdom, echoing the truths that transcend individual experience. We come to recognize that the work we do within ourselves is not isolated. It reverberates outward, subtly influencing the collective consciousness. Each moment of conscious choice, each act of self-compassion, each embrace of inner silence contributes to the gradual awakening of humanity. The people who talk to themselves, once viewed through a lens of peculiarity, are revealed as pioneers on a universal journey, navigating the intricate landscape of the mind towards a more enlightened existence. Thus, the journey continues, a perpetual crucible of consciousness, inviting us to ever deeper levels of awareness, integration, and purpose. It is a testament to the boundless potential of the human spirit, a continuous invitation to refine our inner world and, in so doing, transform the outer one. The symphony of inner speech and inner silence plays on, an evolving masterpiece in the grand unfolding of consciousness. The journey of transforming our inner voice, we discover, is not a finite destination, but an eternal unfolding, a perpetual crucible of consciousness that refines and reshapes our very being. It is a dynamic process, one that demands continuous vigilance, adaptation, and a deepening synthesis between the profound insights offered by psychological understanding and the timeless wisdom of spiritual traditions. We move beyond a mere integration of these approaches to a state where their principles are so intrinsically woven into the fabric of our inner experience that they become indistinguishable, guiding us through the intricate dance of existence. This ceaseless journey necessitates an unwavering commitment to the practices that initiated our transformation. Mindfulness, for instance, transcends its role as a specific meditation technique to become a foundational state of being, a perpetual anchor in the ever-shifting currents of the mind. It is through this ongoing awareness that we continuously recalibrate our relationship with self-talk, observing the stream of thought without identification, noting its patterns, and gently redirecting its course when it veers towards unproductive or detrimental narratives. This continuous self-observation, far from being an arduous task, evolves into an intuitive skill, a gentle art of presence that keeps us attuned to the subtle nuances of our internal landscape. We learn to recognize the nascent stirrings of judgment, the insidious whispers of doubt, or the seductive pull of distraction, not with self-reproach, but with a compassionate, discerning awareness that allows us to respond consciously rather than react habitually. Similarly, the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, once applied deliberately to challenge negative self-talk, become internalized as an organic process of cognitive reappraisal. The inner therapist, initially cultivated through structured exercises, evolves into an integrated aspect of our self-management system. We find ourselves spontaneously questioning the validity of limiting beliefs, seeking evidence for our assumptions, and reframing challenging situations with a newfound clarity and objectivity. This does not imply an eradication of all negative thoughts, for the human mind, in its complexity, will always generate a spectrum of experiences, but rather a profound shift in our capacity to engage with them. We no longer become entangled in their narrative, nor do we passively accept them as immutable truths. Instead, we possess the internal tools to analyze, dissect, and consciously choose our response, fostering an inner dialogue that is constructive, realistic, and ultimately empowering. Yet we must acknowledge that the path of transformation is rarely linear. Life, in its inherent unpredictability, will inevitably present us with challenges, stresses, and periods where old patterns of thought and behavior resurface. These moments, which might feel like regressions, are in fact integral to the cyclical nature of growth. Here, the wisdom gleaned from spiritual traditions proves invaluable. Concepts such as impermanence, anicca, in Buddhism, teach us to accept the transient nature of mental states, understanding that even moments of struggle are temporary and offer opportunities for deeper insight. The practice of self-compassion, cultivated through both psychological and spiritual disciplines, acts as a crucial buffer during these periods. Instead of succumbing to self-criticism or despair when we falter, we learn to meet ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a dear friend. This nurturing inner dialogue fosters resilience, allowing us to acknowledge setbacks without judgment, learn from them, and gently re-engage with our practices, sustaining our effort through the ebb and flow of our inner journey. The deepening synthesis between psychology and spirituality, initially approached as distinct yet complementary fields, evolves into a state of profound inseparability. We discover that our understanding of the mind, its functions, and its potential for transformation is enriched exponentially when viewed through this integrated lens. Psychological models provide the empirical framework, mapping the cognitive architectures and behavioral patterns, while spiritual wisdom offers the existential context, the ethical compass, and the profound aspiration for liberation and interconnectedness. This creates a synergistic relationship where neither realm diminishes the other. Rather, they illuminate and validate each other's insights. We begin to recognize an inner guru within us, not as a mystical entity, but as the emergent wisdom born from years of introspective practice and the absorption of universal truths. This inner guru is capable of guiding us through complex ethical dilemmas, offering intuitive leaps of understanding, and providing a deep sense of inner knowing that transcends mere logical deduction. Simultaneously, an inner scientist emerges, characterized by a curious analytical spirit that continues to observe, hypothesize, and test the efficacy of various mental strategies and contemplative practices. This inner scientist, grounded in empirical reality, ensures that our spiritual aspirations remain rooted and integrated into our daily lives, preventing them from becoming detached or purely theoretical. Together, the inner guru and the inner scientist form a holistic, self-referential system of growth, continually refining our understanding and shaping our path forward. This harmonious interplay of intuition and rationality is a hallmark of the transformed inner voice. Our decisions and insights are no longer solely products of analytical thought or impulsive emotional reactions. Instead, they arise from a deeper wellspring where intuitive guidance, informed by a quieted mind and expansive awareness, is seamlessly integrated with rational assessment. This allows for a more comprehensive and balanced approach to life's complexities, leading to choices that resonate with our deepest values and contribute to our overall well-being and the well-being of others. The inner dialogue becomes a space where these diverse forms of intelligence converge, fostering a clarity that is both intellectually rigorous and spiritually resonant. The profound implications of this individual transformation extend far beyond the confines of our personal experience, initiating a ripple effect that contributes to the evolution of collective consciousness. As we cultivate a more compassionate, clear, and regulated inner world, our outward interactions naturally reflect this internal shift. Empathy and compassion, once perhaps intellectual concepts, become lived realities. The quote 90 we foster allows us to listen more deeply, not only to our own inner promptings, but also to the unspoken needs and perspectives of others. We become less reactive, less quick to judge, and more adept at understanding the underlying motivations and shared humanity that connect us all. This enhanced self-awareness and regulation of one's own inner dialogue inevitably lead to improved communication and a reduction in interpersonal conflict. When we are less driven by egoic narratives or reactive emotional patterns, we approach conversations with greater presence, openness, and a genuine desire for mutual understanding. Misunderstandings are more easily clarified, disagreements are navigated with greater respect, and authentic connection becomes the norm rather than the exception. In families, workplaces, and communities, this collective shift in internal processing translates into environments characterized by greater harmony, collaboration, and psychological safety. Furthermore, a critical mass of individuals engaging in this profound internal work can contribute significantly to how humanity approaches complex global challenges. When leaders, innovators, and citizens operate from a place of wisdom, interconnectedness, and a transformed inner voice, decision-making transcends narrow self-interest or tribalistic thinking. Problems are viewed holistically, with an understanding of their interconnectedness, fostering solutions that are sustainable, equitable, and compassionate. The collective intelligence of humanity is elevated, moving beyond fragmented perspectives to embrace a more integrated systems-thinking approach. This, then, is the vision of the new human paradigm, a humanity that relates to its mind, to others, and to the planet from a place of profound wisdom and interconnectedness. It is a paradigm where the inner monologue, once a source of potential distraction or suffering, becomes a finely tuned instrument for conscious creation, where the ego is understood and integrated rather than repressed, and where the silence beneath the chatter is recognized as the fertile ground for true insight and innovation. We envision a world where human beings are no longer passively subject to the whims of their internal narratives, but are active participants in shaping them, transforming their inner worlds to reflect a deeper reality of unity and purpose. This new paradigm, however, is not a static endpoint to be achieved, but a dynamic, co-created reality, requiring continuous individual and collective effort. It is a living project, perpetually under construction, shaped by each conscious breath, each compassionate thought, and each act of mindful engagement. The journey of understanding and transforming the psychology of people who talk to themselves is thus a profound contribution not only to individual well-being, but to the ongoing evolution of our species. It is an invitation to participate in the grand unfolding of consciousness, recognizing that the whispers within each of us hold the potential to resonate as a symphony of wisdom across the entirety of our shared human experience. The work continues, ceaseless and profoundly significant, as we collectively step into a future forged in the crucible of self-awareness and enlightened dialogue.